Earl sleeps with pill every night until vet notices why. Their daughter had never had trouble sleeping alone. But lately, they couldn't leave her alone in any room, even in the daytime. Everything changed when they adopted the dog. They were glad at first, seeing that their daughter could finally sleep soundly. If only they knew the truth. Dex Pritchett was your average dad living in Kansas with his wife Lindsay and 1-year-old daughter Michaela. Dex was a lecturer in the local college, while his wife ran a bakery in town. As far as he was concerned, his life was more than perfect. Everything would change when little Michaela turned 5. The Pritchett family lived in a lovely neighborhood in Kansas City. Their home was a large beautiful house, with more than enough room for the small family. Looking to fill the space with more family members, Dex and Lindsay agreed to have a pet as they discussed the possibility of having a second child. But trouble would begin before they found a pup to join their family. The issues started when Michaela would complain that she was afraid to sleep alone in her room. She would wake up deep in the night to find herself alone, which Dex knew was harrowing for any child. Dex and Lindsay understood why their kid was afraid, thinking she only feared the dark. But soon enough, Michaela would start crying whenever she was alone, even during the day. Lindsay had been proud of the fact that Michaela had begun to sleep in her own room 3 years ago. Although she had to stay with her until she fell asleep in the beginning, the transition to sleeping on her own had seemingly gone without a hitch. Now, she didn't know what to do. Every time Michaela woke up frightened, she ran to her parents' room. And the problem was just getting worse. Dex and Lindsay were beside themselves with worry as Michaela's phobia of being alone grew. They couldn't set her aside even for brief seconds without remaining in the same room. It wasn't long before they decided enough was enough and made the decision to take Michaela to a pediatrician. Unknown to them, they'd never reached the children's hospital that day. Dex and Lindsay were driving their daughter to the pediatrician when they got stuck in the late morning Kansas City traffic. Bored in the car, Dex threw on some country music to warm the atmosphere while he and Lindsay talked about their interests. But while they were lost in their conversation, something was happening to Michaela in the backseat that would change their lives forever. Unknown to Dex and Lindsay, Michaela had found a way to pull herself to the car window. Thankfully, she didn't roll the window down, only jumped up and down with her gaze stuck outside the car. Dex and Lindsay were deep in conversation when they heard the little angel shout, "Mommy, doggy, doggy." They both turned to her, shocked to find her close to the window. They followed Michaela's eyes, their mouths falling open at what they saw outside their car. Right next to their car was a pet shelter. Several puppies and kittens were inside, and Michaela wanted to pet them. Dex was still debating whether to go to the hospital or take his family into the shop since he and Lindsay had already talked about rescuing a dog when his phone rang. He quickly picked up the call, finding it was their doctor informing them they'd have to reschedule their appointment. Taking it as a sign from above, Dex pulled his car to a parking spot and they all got into the pet store. The dog that chose the Pritchett family was a handsome 2-year-old Pitbull named Silva. Although Lindsay had reservations, he was the perfect dog as far as Dex was concerned. Silva seemed to love his new home. As soon as he left the shelter, the dog became comfortable as a new member of the family. But he had a habit that stunned and scared his new owners, and he only showed this flaw at night. Dex and Lindsay stopped at a pet store on the way home for supplies for their new dog. They got him the best food, a bed, food bowls, and a few toys. That night, they prepared a little welcome feast for Silva. They all cuddled up for a movie afterward, and then the craziest thing happened. Michaela, who rarely slept with the TV on, was sound asleep on the couch. At the floor by her feet was Silva, also fast asleep. Dex and Lindsay tried not to wake the little girl up and successfully transferred Michaela to her room. They expected Silva to wake up as soon as they tried to carry Michaela, which he did, but they didn't expect what he did next. Dex and Lindsay set up the brand new bed and water bowl for Silva in the kitchen and left him there to sleep. He inspected the new bed and turned around a few times before settling in. They closed the door. They returned to the lounge to continue watching TV for a few hours before going to bed themselves. It was only when Lindsay got up for a glass of water from the kitchen that she noticed Silva wasn't in his bed. Lindsay was perplexed, they had closed the kitchen door, she was sure of it. Although Dex had suggested that Silva stay in Michaela's room, she hadn't been comfortable with an unknown dog roaming around the house at night. How did Silva get out? And where was he? Panicking now, Lindsay began to search the house room by room. After going through the lounge, dining room and hallway, she still couldn't find Silva. It was only when she checked Michaela's room for the second time that he startled her. He was hiding underneath her little girl's bed. Although her husband had grown up with pitbulls, Lindsay felt uneasy. She shooed Silva out from under the bed and locked him back in the kitchen. But Silva's strange habit was just beginning. Even though Lindsay locked Silva in the kitchen every night, he kept escaping. Lindsay would panic each time she woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't find him. And every time, she found him under Michaela's bed. This continued for weeks. Lindsay told her husband but he, frustratingly, didn't seem concerned at all. Although Dex and Lindsay let Silva into Michaela's bedroom during the day, Lindsay continued to shut him out at night. Having had dogs before, Lindsay knew that it was important to teach their dog obedience by not letting him have free reign of the house at night. What had happened in his previous home that made him refuse to sleep in his bed? Lindsay had made a habit of getting up every night to take Silva back to the kitchen, but this couldn't go on forever. She had tried to train him to stay in his bed during the night, but he was insistent. The only other option she had was to keep him outside from now on, but she couldn't bring herself to do that. Then, after a particularly exhausting day, she accidentally slept through the night. After all the sleepless nights that Michaela had in the last few months, the Pritchett's usually kept close to her room to rush in when she woke up. But that night, Michaela didn't wake her parents up. She only showed up early in the morning, well rested and with a wide grin plastered on her face. Lindsay was relieved to see that Silva was in his bed. What was happening? Dex and Lindsay didn't know what to make of this development. Michaela was barely an early riser and most definitely not a smiling one, but today everything was different. Dex looked to uncover the mystery and installed 2 cameras, one in Michaela's room and one in the kitchen. Dex intentionally sent Michaela to bed with the cameras in place. What they saw on the footage that evening would leave the couple speechless. Dex and Lindsay rushed to the computer to uncover the secret behind their daughter and dog's behavior. In real time on the monitor, Silva seemed to sleep soundly in his bed in the kitchen, where they had left him. Lindsay noted that the door to the kitchen was closed and they watched as Michaela fall asleep relatively quickly. But she didn't stay asleep for long. Michaela began to toss and turn, then she bolted upright. She pulled her blanket up to her chin and stared into the darkness with wide eyes. Lindsay's immediate motherly instinct was to go and comfort her daughter, but she fought the urge, she wanted to see what would happen. After a few minutes, the little girl did something completely surprising. Michaela carefully slid out of the covers and got on her knees to look underneath the bed. She was doing something Lindsay always did for her to reassure her. Before she tucked her in at night, she was checking for monsters under the bed. After checking, Michaela toddled to the open door. Lindsay thought she was coming to their room like she usually did, but she walked down the hallway instead. With her parents watching her on the camera, Michaela toddled into the kitchen and quietly opened the door. Silva's head rose immediately, as if he had been waiting for the little girl. When they realized what was happening, Dex let out a little chuckle and Lindsay began to smile. They watched as Michaela lead Silva back to her room. Silva followed Michaela to her room and climbed onto her bed, carefully laying next to the girl. Michaela cuddled into the dog in the cutest way possible and fell asleep within minutes. Although buying the cameras had been expensive for Dex, he was glad he'd done it to witness such a beautiful thing. He was about to turn off his computer when something else happened. Michaela woke up with a start, and so did Silva. Michaela looked around her room with drowsy eyes, her brows furrowing as she realized her parents were nowhere to be seen. Her lips began trembling as her eyes grew wide, but Silva whined at her and licked her face, pawing her lovingly until she lay back down. The dog licked her again and lay next to her. Dex and Lindsay watched with their mouths open as everything unfolded. Michaela smiled, petting Silva until her eyes became heavy and she slept. Dex and Lindsay couldn't believe it. And, in the morning, they found Silva sleeping in his own bed. He was trying to be obedient, so he must have learned to sneak back into the kitchen early in the morning. When they finally took Michaela to her pediatrician, the Pritchetts learned that their daughter had a case of monophobia, the fear of being alone, which Silva was helping her get over. Although Michaela would soon outgrow this fear, her bond with Silva would only grow stronger. Lindsay was worried about the sleeping arrangement in the beginning, but she soon learned that sleeping with a 4-legged friend has many benefits. There have been numerous studies on how pets can relieve their owners' stress and anxiety. When Michaela felt the presence of Silva next to her, her cortisol levels, heart rate, and blood pressure decreased. Having a dog sleep with her daughter seemed like the perfect solution to her monophobia, but was Lindsay ready to trust a Pitbull completely just yet? Pitbulls are seen as the most dangerous breed because of their wide jaws and powerful bodies, but these dogs can also be lovable, caring and loyal. It all depends on the way they were trained and raised. And yes, while any unsocialized dog can be dangerous, Lindsay grew to trust her daughter's loyal companion with her daughter's life.